Nick has been honored by numerous prestigious teaching awards. He's a TED speaker and has been known famously for his talk, The One Thing All Great Teachers Do. More than 10 million hits on that talk alone. Here to share his story and explain what's in this box is Nick Furman.
Thank you, thank you. Thank you. Get to bring this thing home. Good afternoon, everybody. Boy, have I got some news for you. And it applies to every single one of you. Each and every person in this room is a teacher. Did you know that? Everybody in here is a teacher. And one of the things I want to do today is convince you that you're a teacher. I may be an educator, a person that holds that title of a professor, but all of us are teachers. And I hope that this message today that I can share with you is one that helps you deal with the time of change that we're in now. Boy, we sure are. And as each of us work with one another and in teams and with our relatives and our friends to inspire change, I want to be able to show you that you are an impactful teacher, every one of you. I want you to think about a favorite teacher of yours. And I want you to think to yourself about that person, whether it's back in second grade, or back just a few years ago in church, or a Boy Scout or Girl Scout meeting that you went to with your grandchild. I want you to think about that favorite teacher, and with your buddy next to you, talk to them about what words or phrases would come to mind when you think of that person and how they would respond to the situation with which we find ourselves in today. How would that favorite teacher of yours respond? Take about 17 seconds with the person next door to you there. Talk to them about some words or phrases that come to your mind when you think of that favorite teacher. Let's do it now, and then we'll come back together. We're actually going to save what you talk about till the end of the talk. So let's do that now. Okay. All right. So you got some words or phrases that come to mind when you think of that favorite teacher, whoever that person might be. We're going to come back to that a little bit later on in our talk today as we bring it home. But I want to tell you a story about a favorite teacher of mine, and it was a person that for less than an hour he spent with me as a 7-year-old child and set me on a path to where I am today in my career. So it's the power of less than an hour that this guy, who we all recognize as Ranger Bill, that was what we called him. And on this particular day in Perry Hall, Maryland, where I'm originally from, I was on my carpet square in Miss Trinko's elementary school class, and we were all anticipating Ranger Bill's visit. Ranger Bill was a park ranger with the Maryland Department of Natural Resources, and he brought with him into our classroom an owl and a hawk and a vulture and a snake and a turtle. And all of these animals were ambassadors of the messages that he was sharing. They were teaching tools. And I got to tell you, I was on the edge of my carpet square. I mean, if you could be on the edge, we all were. Because this guy wasn't just educating us. He was edutaining us. Have you ever heard that? It's one of my favorite words. Edutainment. This guy had an ability of turning down all the distractions in our mind and captivating us with animals. And he was there for less than an hour. And then he left, and I went home and told my parents about it. I said, my gosh, I know what I want to do when I grow up. I want to be like Ranger Bill. Before that, my great-grandmother used to call me her little preacher boy, and she always believed that I would go on and become a preacher. And folks have said to me, Nick, have you ever thought about being a preacher? I probably would do that had it not been for Ranger Bill. We ended up getting in touch with Ranger Bill, my parents and I, and to make a really long story short, I cleaned a lot of cages for Ranger Bill for about 8 years. Sorry to spend time with him. But I got to watch him teach in front of audiences and edutain, and the way he captivated folks using animals. And I finally turned 16 years old, and Ranger Bill offered me a job with the Maryland Department of Natural Resources. It was a dream. And I'll never forget the day that a news broadcaster put a television camera in front of me. I was standing there holding an owl. In fact, here's a picture of me holding a great horned owl a few years ago on the left, and then the one on the right a little bit more recent. It's my favorite animal of all time to work with is a great horned owl. They're wonderful. But I remember this guy putting this camera in my face, and he called me. He said, I'm standing here talking to Ranger Nick. He said it. And right when he said Ranger Nick, I felt like I had really made it. You know, like all these years, I'd looked up to Ranger Bill, and this guy called me Ranger Nick, and it was just incredible to think about. I went on to college, first generation college student, went on to college and thought that I would just go to college, majored in forestry. I thought I'd go back to Maryland and continue teaching in Maryland to groups just like this, but only for an hour and then leaving. But what I discovered as a student, as a graduate student, is the power that you can have when you spend a little time with somebody. And I got to see students grow and change over weeks and over semesters. And that's what hooked me into teaching. And it convinced me that not only was I a teacher, but all of us are teachers as well. I want to talk to you today about some of the things that I believe that great teachers do and how they respond in this time of change. The first thing that I think that great teachers do is they harness teachable moments. Isn't that a cool phrase, teachable moments? If you make a mistake, call it a teachable moment. And it just makes it seem better. That guy, Bob Ross, you ever seen him painting on PBS and things? It's just unbelievable as a painter. He calls things happy accidents. Call it a happy accident. It makes it feel better. Just it's a teachable moment. You make a mistake, it's a teachable moment. As an educator, I love to capitalize on and harness teachable moments. And one of the things I do at the University of Georgia is I use animals in teaching. And I teach a class called Teaching with Animals. And it's just like it sounds. It's like a public speaking class, but involving animals. And I know that y'all are probably waiting for me to either trip over this box or what in the world is inside of this box that I brought with us today. We drove down from Athens, Georgia, just so this little lady could come out of this box. I'm going to take her out and show her to you, and hopefully we can get her right on the camera so y'all can see. This little lady helps me harness teachable moments. Let me show her to you. And I talk to her because she is a sweetie. Hey, darling. Look, I want you to see her on your camera. Look at this. If you can get a close-up of this face, my goodness. Hey, darling, look at this. Dad, what are you doing? Is she on the, or over here? This camera over here. Look at that little, gang, this is a eastern box turtle. And this is an eastern box turtle that's missing a leg. As sad as it is, she had a little run-in with a lawnmower and survived it, but has been in our home for about 2 years and will remain for the rest of her life, which could be up to 80 years. So she'll probably end up being in a will that we have for our kids. But this little lady, Miss Sharon, we call her, Sharon, is so good at helping me harness teachable moments. And what you're seeing there on the slide is a life skills wheel from 4-H. I was really big into 4-H, a youth development organization. And oh, look at that sweet face. Hey, darling, all the folks looking at you. Sometimes if you tilt her a little bit, she kind of waves at you with that arm. Maybe she'll do it today. But the coolest thing about using an animal like this to do things like teach those life skills, communication, problem solving, critical thinking, thinking on your feet, is that this turtle helps to relieve public speaking anxiety. I want to tell you how. And I hope that she doesn't demonstrate it today. Okay, so don't do this, but I'm going to tell you. I have football players that take my class that are scared to death to stand up in front of an audience in class. They may stand in front of 90,000 people and run around with a football, but stand up and deliver a message in front of your peers. That's tough. Well, all of a sudden, I introduce Sharon in my Teaching with Animals class, and I hand her to one of my students, a football player, let's say, or any other student, and they're holding Sharon. And all of a sudden, their anxiety seems to go down. And we actually study this, the influence of animals on reducing public speaking anxiety. So I'll watch a student and we'll actually videotape my students as they're teaching and holding an animal. And then something like this happens, and Sharon, don't do this, but all of a sudden, a teachable moment happens and Sharon pees, all right? It happens. And the student is standing there holding Sharon and she pees, and all of a sudden, the student laughs and the class laughs, and Sharon probably secretly laughs too, like, ha, gotcha. And then all of a sudden, from that point forward, their teaching is so much better. They capitalize on a teachable moment. They go with it. It's not scripted. This is a conversation we're having with an audience. That moment, that unplanned moment, does incredible things for that student in building confidence in their communication ability. So when unplanned things happen, teachable moments happen, we as teachers have a decision. We can either capitalize or we can ignore them. I say capitalize on. Let's take advantage of that teachable moment. And before one of those teachable moments happens, darling, I'm going to put you back, okay? Now that you're waving at everybody, aren't you just sweetie? Isn't that something? So I'm going to put Miss Sharon back. We call her Sharon because I like to use her in sharing things about wildlife, you know, so that's how it goes. The dad jokes are just awful when I'm a teacher. That's another thing you get to do as a teacher. So harnessing teachable moments is very, very, very important. I want to talk about another thing that I think great teachers, all of us, do and should do even more of, and that's evaluate ourselves. As an educator, it's tough to do because it's sometimes, it's difficult not to take comments from our audience, our students, personally. We need to take time to evaluate what we're doing and ask the question, how am I doing as a communicator, and what do I need to do to change to better reach you as a learner? And that takes data and that takes change. But the idea of evaluating ourselves, I have a thing on the slide that says a reality check. Throughout my semester, I'll do anonymous reality checks with my students, just sending them an online link and saying, how are things going for you? The past 2 years with this pandemic, asking that question, how are you doing? And meaning it, it'd be incredible some of the things the students tell you. Now, I'm not a psychologist, but they will tell me things that I want to sit down with them and say, well, tell me, how are things going? Because you really seem like you're struggling. As a teacher, we need to have that sense of care. And all of us have that in us. Sometimes it just takes that opportunity to say, when you say, how are you doing to somebody, really being prepared to listen and mean it. How are you doing? Taking that opportunity to say that, doing your own reality check as you work with others. Keep that in mind as you leave here today. Be willing to evaluate yourself. I've been humbled for the past almost 9 years to do a television segment called Ranger Nick. Go figure, it's called Ranger Nick. And bless the camera guys' hearts because they have a hard enough time keeping up with me when I'm doing the show. So I really appreciate you guys doing that too. I'm trying to maintain where I am. I have these sudden bursts of enthusiasm. I just can't help it. And that's a good thing about a teacher. But accepting imperfection is important because I sure have a lot of imperfections. And when they put that camera about 6 inches from my face like Ray's doing right there, boy, you pick up on your imperfections. You ever watch yourself on video before? Well, that's accepting imperfection, All of my students watch themselves teach, and that's such a rewarding experience for them. Even though it's awkward, it shows them things that they're doing that they can improve on. Nothing personal, just shows them what you can do a little bit better, polish a little bit more. So important to do that. Accept imperfection. As you're getting that information from your friends and colleagues on how you're doing, be willing to accept that you're going to need to change a little bit and rely on that data. And one of the best things we can do when we ask that question, how am I doing? And you gather all that data, be willing to give it back to the people that gave it to you and say, listen, I heard what you said. Here's what y'all told me, and here's what we're going to do about it. My students have been amazed when I actually read their comments and, well, Ranger Nick's actually going to change based on what we said. Wow, pretty cool at building that sense of rapport. I'm going to tell you something else about accepting imperfection. During the pandemic, some of the folks at the University of Georgia reached out to me and said, so Nick, how can I better prepare my lectures online as a professor and tape record them so my students can watch them? I want to do a better job at that. And I said, well, what are you doing? They said, well, I'll script out my lecture. And I said, whoa, right there. You scripted it out, throw that script away. How conversational can we be when it's scripted? I said, have a general outline. And I said, I know, but what if I'm sitting there and I'm taping my lecture, and then my cat runs across the back of my chair in my home when I'm trying to tape it? I said, you know what? That's beautiful. Let the cat do that, because that shows your students that you're a real person. They're getting a glimpse into your life. You ever run into your teacher at the grocery store before when you were a kid, and you're looking into their cart? What do they have in there? They're a real person. I've run into students of mine, and I'm worried, like, oh, God, what did I have in the cart? But they're a real person. And that builds a sense of rapport between you as a teacher and your students. So I tell the faculty at the University of Georgia, listen, don't script this stuff. Make it conversational, make it a little bit more loose and flowing, and I think you'll find that your students will treat you more like a normal, somewhat normal human being, right? So that's a good thing. So the importance of imperfection. I want to tell you a story. I have friends that know that I've taught at the university for about 14 years now, and it's just the coolest job in the world. I really mean that. This is my very, very favorite thing to do, is stand up in front of folks and teach. And I learned so much from my students, and I wish we had an opportunity today to get that feedback together. But one of the things that I do in my classes, and I've gotten busted on a little bit by this from some of my friends, they know that I teach college students, I teach graduate students, I teach students that are working on PhDs. And when I read good work from my students and they earn a 90% or higher on one of their assignments, I put a stamp on their assignment. I stamp it. And people are like, Nick, come on, this isn't fourth grade. Why are you putting a stamp on there? I said, look, I really think it matters. You know, like I'll have a little turtle stamp, and if you get a 90% or above, I write excellent work right on the assignment. And the students are like, you know, at first I thought, well, maybe they'll, you know, really think this is super hokey, and they do. But you'll see them when I'm handing assignments back, kind of looking at each other's papers. Oh, wow, I got a turtle. You know, what'd you get? These are 20-some-year-old, 30-some-year-old students getting excited. We're giving feedback. But there was a time that I almost stopped doing this altogether. I almost stopped relaying feedback altogether with the stamps and just started grading, put the grade on there and give it back. And I almost stopped until a particular event with a football player. So when I was at the University of Florida, I went to the University of Florida for my PhD, and when I'm in Athens, I can't say University of Florida too often. I know I can say it here pretty well. But I was at the University of Florida as a graduate student. And I was there teaching a large class. It was a public speaking class. And a lot of the football players, a lot of the athletes would sit in the front row. And so when I would be handing back assignments, I would hand back these assignments and did that at the end of class. And then I'd go back to my little cubicle there in my office as a grad student. And my cubicle was like in this back corner of this office. There was a window there, and I'm in the back corner. I can't escape. So when a student comes in, I'm there. You know, I can't run from him. And on this one particular day, there was a knock at the door. I had just gotten back to my cubicle after handing out the assignments. And there's a knock at the door, and it's this football player at the door. And the guy, who was like a linebacker, he took up the whole door. Like he looked like a refrigerator, you know, standing there. And he had the test in his hand. The test looked like one of those little Post-it notes. I mean, that's how big the guy was. I mean, he's just standing. Ranger Nick, can I talk to you for a second? Come on in, come on in. So he comes over to my desk, and he's very serious. And he hands me his assignment, and he goes, I got a 91% on this, and I didn't get a stamp. Big linebacker. And I look at it, and sure enough, I must have forgotten to put a stamp on it. So I said, gosh, I am so sorry. I had a lot of students I must have forgotten. So I reached into my desk, and I got this little owl stamp. I love owls, you know, from the picture. I got this little owl stamp, and I stamped it on his assignment, and I wrote, outstanding job, just like that. And I hand this assignment to this big football player. And this guy walked out of there, I mean, like he was going to go show his mom. Just so excited. And there were other grad students sitting behind me in the office, and they were just kind of like, man, what in the world? What are you doing? I said, look, I don't know. I just put stamps on there, and it elevates the quality. It gets them excited to do an assignment. That guy wanted to do a better job on the next exam to see what other stamp I had. That's the kind of power of feedback. We spend a lot of time today focusing on what's negative, what could be improved. Let's take a minute or two when you leave here today, remind somebody how good of a job they're doing. Maybe it's with a stamp or a star or whatever it might be. Gosh, that's motivational. We need that today. It matters. It matters. The last thing I think that great teachers do in these times of change is they teach, not just present. When I have a lesson plan that's in front of me and I'm going into class, it's a lesson plan. It's not a lesson script. And I preached on the value of not scripting something. But what if a teachable moment happens in class, a discussion that we have? I've got to be willing to set that lesson plan aside and capitalize on that discussion moment. What you're looking at there in that picture is a wonderful picture of another one of our turtles and one of my students visiting an organization called Extra Special People. And ESP, for short, is just outside of Athens, Georgia, and there were several hundred individuals with special needs. I call them special abilities, because that's what they are. These individuals have special abilities, and my students take our animals, my wife and I have all these animals at home, and they take these animals, my students, to ESP, and they teach those participants. And I got to tell you, when it comes time to overcome public speaking anxiety, and they see the way those participants engage with Sharon and some of our other critters, it's incredible. The relationship, that's what teaching's about. It's not just presenting. And I got to tell you, at universities, we do a lot of presenting. We've got to get back to teaching. Relationships, engagement, turning down the noise, all the distractions. It is absolutely about relationships. And I think that's something that's so powerful. So as you think about that today, as you leave here, think about how you can teach others, not just present to them. Well, you take a look at some of the 5 things that I've said today about things that a great teacher would do, and I wonder what you told your neighbor. I think we talked about things like harnessing teachable moments and evaluating yourself and accepting imperfection, relaying feedback with stamps, and teaching, not just presenting. But isn't it all about that's what a great teacher does? They care. And I think that Maya Angelou said it best. Look at that line. Isn't that the coolest thing? People will forget what you said, they'll forget what you did, but I tell you what, they're going to remember how you made them feel. It's stuff like this that I love doing, and I hope that y'all get a chance. Shoot me an email or a text or call. Let me know a story of a great teacher in your life. I'd love to hear, and I so much appreciate your time. Thanks for making me smile. I hope I made you smile. Y'all take care.
Question, Nick. I have one question.
Yes, sir.
Let's just say I'm in your class.
I like a question that begins with let's just say.
Let's just
That's
say
all
I'm in your class and I get a 64. What stamp do I get?
We'll give you some encouragement. We'll give you a pat on. Well, let's try this again. Let's do this one more time.
Well, thank you so much. That was really fun. And I couldn't agree more. It's the unexpected, usually improvised moment. Yeah. And I've certainly done this on television plenty of times where it's the mistake I make that people remember. They don't remember the news I present. They remember where I flubbed. Or you remember those moments in the course of a day that come organically.
Right.
They happen organically, and they are more important in many ways than the scripted content you came in on. I don't want to hurt.
I'm going to get Miss Sharon
out of here. Nick, thank you so much. You put a
y'all.
smile on lots of people's faces.
Y'all did too.